the 28th of October, 2020. Chapter 2, Part 3. Mononaga pointed his finger, preparing to cast a spell on the straw man in the corner of the arena. Mononaga did not know how much pure damage spells. Instead, he focused on instant death spells with additional effects. As a result, he was less effective against non-living entities. He should have selected a simple damaging spell against a target like the one before him, but Mononaga's levels were largely in necromancy-type classes, which strengthened his necromantic skills. However, the effectiveness of these spells was several notices below a character whose class levels enchanted combat spells. He glanced curiously at the children to the side, whose eyes were glittering in anticipation. He felt uneasy as he wondered whether he could live up to their expectations. Then Mononaga peeked at the two huge monsters. Their massive bodies were 3 meters tall and resembled inverted triangles. Their skeletal structure was a mixture of humans and dragons, and covered in corded, sinewy muscles, which were in turn sheathed by a layer of scales that were harder than steel. Their faces resembled those of dragons, while their tails were as thick as tree trunks. They were wrinkles and bipedals, like a dragon standing on its hind legs. Their arms were wider around than a man's torso, and each was about half the length of its body. They bore weapons that resembled both a shield and a sword. These monsters were called Dragonkin, and under the control of Aura's beast tamer skills, they rearranged the Colosseum to their liking. Although they were level 55 monsters with no special abilities of note, their powerful arms and prodigious stamina were a match for higher leveled monsters. Mononaga sighed softly, and then looked back at the strawman. It was quite troubling to have people look at him with expectation in their eyes. His objective this time was to verify that he could use magic. The reason for allowing Aura and Mara to witness the experience was to impress his power upon them before the other guardians arrived. This way, they would learn that opposing Mononaga was a foolish course of action. The two kids did not seem like they would betray him, nor did he feel that they would betray him. However, if he lost the ability to use magic, Mononaga was not confident that they would stay loyal to him. Aura treated Mononaga like an old friend, but to Mononaga it was the first time they had met. He could tell that the twins were leveling crafted embodiment of the skilled member's hard work. However, there were no guarantee that their design and programming was perfect. In the face of countless situations and stimuli, a discrepancy or weakness might appear somewhere. They were intelligent beings who could think on their own, so flaws in their reasoning must exist somewhere. If they're not programmed to be loyal to weaklings, what would that mean to him? In all likelihood, they were not written to be slavishly loyal. Whether or not they obeyed the order would depend on who the giver was, and would be bad enough if they did not listen to him. But what if they betrayed their guild leader after finding out that he was powerless? It was not good to have too many doubts, but blind trust was not the wise move either. He would cross the bridge when he came to it. Mononaga turned his mind to the present. Another reason for coming here was that if he found that he could not use his magic, he could discuss the situation with Aura and Mara. The twins thought he had come to test the powers of the staff, so now that its power had been proven, he would cover up any ineffectiveness on his own magic. It was a pretty good plan. Mononaga could not help but congratulate himself. He had ever been so cool and calculating in the past. However, there was nobody here who could answer Mononaga's question. He cast aside the doubts in his mind and focused on using the magic of Icarus. There were over 6,000 spells in the game, from Tier 1 to Tier 10, as well as Super Tier magic. These spells were divided among various types and schools, and Mononaga could use 718 of them. A normal level 100 player would only be able to use 300 of them, so Mononaga was an exceptional case. Mononaga had memorized almost all of these spells, and he considered which one to use now. To begin with, because the restrictions on friendly fire had been lifted, he needed to know how effective radius of a spell would show itself. Therefore, he decided against the single target spells. He picked an area effect spell. Next, considering his target was a straw man, he could, In Yggdrasil, you cast a spell by tapping its respective icon. However, there were no icons for him to touch, therefore there had to be some other way. He was not sure, but he had a faint idea how to use magic. There was a power hidden within. Just like how he had deactivated his negative touch, Mononaga focused with himself. An icon appeared as though floating in mid-air, and Ainz smiled in delight. He was fully aware of information like spell effective radius, his recast delay, and so on. Knowing this information, being sure of his power filled him with a surging excitement and warm satisfaction. Unlike in Yggdrasil, he felt that the magic was part of him. This was a satisfaction he could never have experienced in Yggdrasil. He channeled his jubilation in his heart. Although his mood calmed quickly, he could still feel joy and excitement into his fingertips and spoke the words, "Fireball!" An expanding globe of flame shot out from the finger pointing at the strawman. The fireball struck the strawman unerringly, as he had predicted. It burst, releasing a wave of scorching flame that blew the strawman away. The inner part of the fireball exploded, turning the strawman and the surrounding air into a sea of fire. All this happened in an instant. Then beside the blackened strawman, there was nothing left. Ora and Marja watched Mononaga snicker, clueless as to what was going on. Ora, set up another strawman. Ah yes, at once. Hurry up and do it. One of the dragonkins picked up another strawman and placed it beside the burned one. Mononaga placed paste around the strawman before casting a spell on it. Napalm! A column of flame appeared beside the strawman, engulfing it in fire. Mononaga paused a bit, then cast another spell on the remains of the strawman. Fireball! The fireball struck the remains of the strawman, shattering its ashes in the puff of smoke. The recast time between spells was the same as in Yggdrasil. The actual process of casting was way faster than in Yggdrasil. Previously, in order to cast an area effect spell, you would need to choose the spell, then move the area effect cursor over the desired area. The process now was quicker than that. Perfect, Mononaga said, his voice filled with the same satisfaction as he felt in his heart. Mononaga-sama, should I prepare more strawmen? Or, still not understanding. She was already aware that Mononaga was a mighty magic caster. She did not feel the show before her was anything special. However, that was the impression Mononaga wanted to give them, and from the looks on the twins' faces, it seemed he had succeeded. No, there's no need. I wish to try something else. After rejecting Ora's suggestions, Mononaga began his next experiment. Message. The first party he tried to contact was GM. In Yggdrasil, when one used the message spell, as long as the other party was within the game, one would hear a call tone. Otherwise, there would be no sound. The spell would immediately terminate. What happened now was somewhere between both of these. It felt like something was constantly reaching out, as though looking for something to connect to. This was the first time Mononaga had experienced something like this, and it was difficult to describe. This feeling continued for a while, and then, after failing to connect, the message spell ended. A profound sense of disappointment flooded through him. Mononaga tried the same spell again. This time, he did not choose a GM. This time, he picked one of his comrades from the past, a member of Ainz Organ. He cast a spell through his heart, which filled one part of hope and 99% of resignation. As expected, there was no response. He tries to contact the 41 members of the guilds with a message, but after receiving no reply, Mononaga gently shook his head. In truth, he had expected this outcome and had resigned himself to it. Actually being confronted by that fact filled him with an incomprehensible feeling of despair. In the end, Mononaga decided to contact Sebas. He got through. This proved that the message spell was working, and that most likely we could only contact people within this new world. Mononaga-sama! A voice of deepest respect echoed through his mind. Mononaga considered that Sebas might have been bowing to him on the other side of the message, like in real-life confidence. Just then, Sebas spoke again, as Mononaga felt silent from thinking about these ridiculous things. May I ask if something is wrong? Ah, forgive me. I spaced out. That's right. How are the surrounding place? Yes, we are surrounded by plains, with no intelligent creatures in sight. A plain, not a swamp? The great underground tomb of Nazareth should have been bordered by a swamp. It was inhabited by frog-like demi-humans called Tuvex. The swamp was shrouded in a mist, And it was poisonous. Yes, there were only plants around us. Mononaga could not help but smile. All this was too much. In other words, the great underground tomb of Nazareth has been wholly transported to a different place. Sebas, is there anything floating in the sky, or did anything like a message appear? No, there's nothing like that. The heavens are bounded as the 6th floor's night sky. What? Did you say night sky? Is there anything suspicious around you? No, I have not seen anything unusual. Besides the great underground tomb of Nazareth, there are no other man-made structure in sight. Is that so? Is that so? What should he say? All Mononaga could do was grasp his head and try to think, but in his heart he knew that this was most likely the case. Sebas's silence was a subtle hint that he was awaiting orders. Mononaga glanced at the strap on his left wrist. In another 20 minutes, the other guardians would arrive. If that was the case, there was only one order he could give. Return in 20 minutes. When you come back to Nazareth, head to the Colosseum. All the guardians will be coming. So when you arrive, I hope you will tell them about what you saw. Understood. Then gather as much information as you can before you return. After hearing Sebas's acknowledgement, Mononaga terminated the message bell. Just as Mononaga was about to sigh in relief that everything was over, he remembered the expectant looks on the twins' faces. He had already told them he was going to verify the staff's power, so you had to let them see it. Mononaga grasped the staff and pondered what fraction of its power he should reveal. The numberless powers within the staff of Irons or Gone seemed to be begging Mononaga to unleash them. Right now, he needed to flash his spell. Summon Primal Fire Elemental. In accordance with Mononaga's will, the orb of fire grasped within one of the staff's snake mouths pulsed with puissance. Mononaga could feel the movement of a mighty invisible power and thrust of the staff of Irons or Gone forth. A vast ball of light bloomed from the tip of the staff, and a vortex of roaring flame spilled forth from that globe of radiance. The fire spun faster and faster, until the tornado of flame reached a width of 4 meters and a height of 6 meters. The crimson inferno threw off gusts of scorching air in all directions. From the corner of his eyes he could see the dragonkin protecting Aura and Mara with their vast bodies. The searing winds made his cape flap violently. So intense was the heat that it would not have been unusual for a normal person to be burned by them. But Mononaga had acquired a complete immunity to fire damage in order to negate one of the weaknesses of the undead, so it had no effect on him at all. Soon the vast cyclone of fire, swallowing the surrounding air as it burned hot enough to melt metal, began to flicker and shudder as it took a humanoid form. Primal fire elementals could be said to be among the highest ranking of all elemental monsters. They were over level 85, just like he had with the Moonlight Wolves. Mononaga felt a mysterious connection with primal fire element. Ooh-wah. Aura was watching it intensely as she made noises of surprise. As she looked upon the top-tier elemental, something that even her summoning powers would not be able to bring forth. Aura's face bore a look of excited admiration, like a child who had just received a dearly beloved present. Do you want to fight it? Eh? Eh? After a moment of hesitation, Aura grinned innocently. Compared to a normal child's smile, hers were a little. No, the truth was that it was quite scary. In contrast, Mara's smile from the side seemed more like that of a child. Can I? Don't worry, it'll be fine even if you defeat it. Mononaga shrugged to indicate that it was all right. The staff could summon one primal fire elemental a day. In other words, the staff could summon another such being after 1 day had passed. As such, defeating it would not be a great loss. Ah, I suddenly remembered that I had something urgent to do. Mara? A hand reached out and firmly grasped Mara's arm, not allowing him to escape. His sister had no intention of fleeing. Aura's smile stopped Mara in his tracks. Perhaps the Mononaga might have been a cute girl's smile, but to the other person present, who looked almost the same as Aura, it was anything but cute, and Mara's face froze solid as he looked at her. She dragged Mara in front of the primal fire element. Mara's eyes looked around, and he looked desperately to Mononaga for help. In response, to this hopeful smile that blossomed delicately on his face, Mononaga simply clapped. The flower of hope promptly withered. All right, try your best, you two. Don't blame me if you get hurt. Kay! All responded energetically. In contrast with Mara's nearly inaudible and disciplined reply, Mononaga felt that as long as Mara was around, neither of them would get hurt. First, by the power of the connection between himself and his summoned creature, he ordered the primal fire demon, the elemental, to attack the twins. As the conflagration that was the primal fire elemental approached them, the twins met its attack with Aura, the frontliners, while Mara was the rear guard. Aura slashed the primal fire element, holding her whip in both her hands, while Mara used magic to deal damage. Well, it seems it'll be an easy fight. Mononaga's eyes left the one-sided battle taking place before him, and began to ponder the other things he needed to investigate. He had already finished verifying that he could use and activate his spells and equipped magic items. Thus the next things he had to check on were his other items. Scrolls, wands, and rods were particularly important. All of them were magic items that could produce a spell-like effect. Scrolls were one-use expendables, while rods and wands had charges, well they consumed to produce their effects. Mononaga possessed many magic items. He was a hoarder by nature, and did not like using expendable items because he felt it was a waste, to the point where he did not even feel like using high-end recovery items when he encountered a boss. This went beyond more prudence to miserliness, which was his stock of items were so great. In Yggdrasil, all of these were stored in his personal inventory. Then in the world where he had his inventory, all of its contents were gone. Mononaga recalled how he had opened his inventory in the past and reached his hand into the air as though searching for something. It felt as though he was reaching his hand past the surface of a lake, and an observer would think that Mononaga's hand and part of his arms had vanished into nothingness. Then, like he was operating a window, Mononaga swept his hand to one side, a hole appeared out of nowhere, and within were beautifully crafted magic staves. It was exactly like the inventory in Yggdrasil. He moved his hand in a scrolling motion. In the space revealed, one could see all manner of scrolls, bands, weapons, armor, cosmetic items, gems, potions, and other consumables. The sheer number of magic items in here was awe-inspiring. Thus relieved, Mononaga could not help but laugh. If this were the case, Mononaga felt that he could guarantee his own safety, even if everyone in the tomb set themselves against him. As he absently watched Aura and Mara's intense battle, Mononaga considered the things he had learned so far. Were the NPCs he met programs? No, their sapience was such that they were indistinguishable from human beings. Programs could not show such complex emotions. He could assume that for some mysterious reason they had ended up in like human beings. And what was this world? He had no idea. Since he could use Yggdrasil's magic here, it made sense to think of this place as being in Yggdrasil. But after observing various discrepancies, it did not seem like he was in a game. Was he in a game or a new world? The answer was probably one of those. How should I deal with future events? Mononaga had already verified that he could use his abilities from Yggdrasil. That being the case, if the data for the monsters and NPCs of the great underground tomb of Nazarick had carried over as well, he was reasonably sure that they were not his enemies. The thing was, if they were not data programs but some other kind of being, then he would have to treat them differently. For the time being, it would be best to display the attitude of a superior being and put on an act of stern majesty, provided he could pull it off. In what direction should I proceed in the future? He should search hard for clues, although he was not sure what was going on with this world. For the time being, Mononaga was simply a clueless wayfarer. He had to take small steps and carefully gather information. If this is another world, should I try to return to the real world? There were doubts in his heart. If he had friends in the real world, then he should go back to it. If his parents were still alive, he would desperately find a way back to them. If he had family members to care for, or a girlfriend, but he didn't have anyone like that. His life was an endless cycle of going to the office to work and returning home to log on to Yggdrasil, where he would prepare for his comrades to come back. Now, None of that waited for him. Then was there any point at all in going back? But if he could go back, then he should think of a way to get back. It's better to have more options, because the world outside might be a hellish one. What should I do? Mononaga's quiet mumbling carried softly throughout the air.